Welcome to the Binding Mind podcast. My name is Lorenzo Salazar.
And I'm Ian Spector. Let's jump in.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Binding Minds. Our next guest has a passionate focus on film, the power of story, and how those stories elevate people and brands. Please welcome the creative director, executive producer of Lemieux Company, Wilson Lemieux. Welcome.
Hey
Thanks for
guys,
being here,
super happy
Wilson.
to be here. Oh, 1,000,000%, Ian. I really appreciate you guys reaching out and us being able to get this together. I always love talking shop, so this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this one's going to be a little different for us. Never talked to someone who does, as far as like an initial focus, strictly video, and but I'm excited to dive into this conversation about some processes and how things operate and that kind of stuff. And so, man, I want to kind of start things off to learn a little bit about you. Grew up in Wellington, Texas. For those who don't know where Wellington is, it is the East Panhandle of Texas, dang close to Oklahoma. So, like Wilson, I mean, has video always been a passion for you, or what? How did we get here?
So I can remember I was in the 4th grade. And, at the end of every school year, they have like the little award ceremony. And it's like, this kid didn't go to the bathroom as much as every other kid, or this kid could tie his shoes better than the other folks. And I could remember I was like actually devastated, but I'd won most creative in Mrs. Hennard's 4th grade class. Right. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Right. Like, I don't know what there is to do with this. And so like, I've always had a tendency for creativity. And it wasn't until I really got to college that I knew that advertising was like a thing. Like, you could get paid to come up with ideas as long as they were good enough to sell something, right? And I was always the kid that could like sell the most donuts at the fundraiser and those kind of things coming up through high school and middle school and stuff like that. And so once I found advertising kind of as a niche at West Texas A&M University, and at that time we had such a killer program. I mean, we were going to national championships for advertising, partnered up with like Ad America and the AAF and stuff like that. And so like the creative component of advertising, as far back as me being 19, 20 years old, was something that I'd always fallen in love with. And I can look all the way back to my childhood to look at, like films like The Land Before Time or Page Master or The Never Ending Story and stuff like that. It was like, oh man, that's so cool. But it never clicked that you could get paid to make commercials or videos or films, even at the highest level, right? And so once that clicked for me in college, it was one of those things that's like, oh, heck yes, as long as we can make it look cool enough, like maybe I can make a living doing this, right? And so for the better part of, I would say, really 10 to 13 years, I've had a really passionate focus on film and how it works in advertising. And coming up out of a town like Wellington, Texas, a lot of times kids in those smaller communities don't realize that that's possible, that you can do that. And I was one of those, right? And I've just been very thankful and lucky to a certain extent that Amarillo and West Texas in general has kind of embraced the kind of work that we do. And I'm just thankful that we get to keep doing it.
And I'm glad you touched on that because, as you mentioned, a lot of small town individuals don't think that that's a possibility. I mean, we are in an ag-driven state, big part of Texas, what we do, cotton, farming, things like that. So with you wanting to have the opportunity to maybe focus more on that and maybe create that into, a career, is there something that you looked into while you're at WT or an individual that helped, push you to those, resources to be able to learn more of what's within this industry?
So there's this quote from Orson Welles, the famous director, where they're asking him, did you know what you did was possible, or how did you come up with this idea? And he said it was just sheer ignorance, right? And I can remember I used to work at a bank equipment company that was actually located in Lubbock called Smith Hamilton. And I was like, I'm going to start my own video business. If I can make an ATM look cool, spoiler alert, I didn't make it look cool, but I thought I did. If I can get paid to make ATMs look cool, imagine what I could do if I can make like a sandwich look cool or X, Y, or Z, whatever product, service, etc. And my boss at the time said, I thought the well would run dry. I didn't know that you'd be able to create a market. And I think that some of the market that we've been able to create just comes from the sheer ignorance, hope, and optimism of being like, look, if I put in enough reps, if I care enough about this, if I try to emulate what I'm seeing on a big scale for national brands and apply that to brands that are local, I think I could make this work. And thank God it has over the last nine or so years. But when I started, I just thought, look, my stuff's going to be good enough, which is so. I wish I still had this kind of like cocky arrogance at 32 that I did at 22, where it was like, this stuff's going to be so good. I understand advertising well enough that we're going to make a living doing this. And so I think a lot of data at the time probably would have suggested that it wouldn't have been possible, right? But through luck and hard work and determination, and I think just sheer optimism, we've been able to build a need and want for higher quality content, both in the Texas Panhandle and then West Texas and even beyond, just because it's one of those things that's like, hey man, like we can do it here. There's a saying that we've got on t-shirts and caps that's it's we ain't from Hollywood, with love from Amarillo. And it works really great from a branding perspective because, one, if you do a really good job, you can say, well, shoot, we ain't from Hollywood. But then if you screw up, you can say, well, what'd you expect? I'm not from Hollywood. So all that being said, like, I figured there would be a need for it, but I think over the last 10 years, we've been able to maybe develop a better need for it. And a lot of that comes from just the curiosity and willingness to take risks from our clientele as well. I mean, I won't sit here and act like all of this is just because I had a dream one day, right? I think a lot of it comes from, you get lucky, you get one spot that turns into another spot, and then you take another spot and you leverage that to get something else, and you just double down. And then eventually people are like, well, okay, this should be the standard. And then you have 3 or 4 different spots playing at a local Super Bowl between Amarillo area and Lubbock area. And you're like, you look up and you're like, oh shoot, like this is what we're doing now. But in the beginning, it was just like, I'm going to go out here. We had $600 in the account and like a hope and a prayer. And it was like, I'm just going to go for it. Right. And so I hope that answers your question. I feel like I probably flown off.
Absolutely.
But,
and
Yeah,
I mean, a follow up to that, was there ever a moment where you just were, you just kind of were like, felt defeated, and how did you overcome that? How did you overcome that? Either it was some adversity of, we really do want to build up this type of clientele, and then you finally hit that wow moment of like, this is really taking off, and
sure.
things are coming through. I mean, I'm interested to
Yeah.
learn about that.
Well, I think that like any business owner, any creative, anybody in this space or in any other space, I think that everything comes in seasons, right? I mean, there's a saying that like this too shall pass, and a lot of folks apply it to the bad times, but I think you should apply it to the good times too. Like it's not always rainbows and sunshine. And I feel like, at least once a year, you look down and you're like, okay, I'm not growing as well as I'd like to. I'm not hitting the same kind of customers I would normally hit on one hand, or we're not getting the kind of clientele that I'm hoping to get on one hand. But what I've learned over the last 10 years or so is that you just have to sit in the pocket. And working in advertising in West Texas, and then even more so working in creativity in West Texas, which I think Lorenzo or Ian, you just touched on, where it's like almost seen as secondary, right? Or even tertiary to marketing efforts. She can be a fickle mistress working in this industry. And sometimes she's like, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to be married to the game? And there's some days where it's like, man, I might just go work at Home Depot, right? But the love you have for doing this kind of work, I think gets you through. And, even at 32 now, looking back at stuff, I still get excited and still get butterflies when the lights turn on, right? And it's such a blessing to be able to do what we do. And we've done it for, Top Golf or the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Utah Jazz. We've worked with Call of Duty League. We've worked with big brands, et cetera. And all that's fun and it's great. But it's such a fulfilling endeavor to be able to do it for companies locally in West Texas and companies that thought maybe this was outside of their reach, right? And so to be able to do something or emulate something that you'd see maybe come from like Progressive or from like a huge brand like the Mayhem Man, et cetera, and then apply those same kind of creative principles to maybe a local bank or a local mom and pop like body shop to do that, and then to see marketing directors and founders and CEOs and owners of companies' eyes widen. It's the most fulfilling thing to me, is to be able to like pull something out of thin air. And sure, it's great if you do it for like Apple or AT&T or whoever, because they have more money than God and access to the best creative talent in the world. But to do it for a guy named Loki, who like spent his whole life like turning a wrench to make sure that people had their cars taken care of, and this is a business he wants to hand down to his sons, to see it click for them is, I think, really what keeps me going. Because growing up in West Texas, growing up in Wellington, and I know you guys have done the same, coming from similar sized towns, a lot of times you think this stuff's not for you, right? You think this is not meant for me. This is not meant for our communities. This is something you see in Hollywood or Dallas or Austin or New York or whatever. And I've worked in all of those places. But to be able to do it here is such a fulfilling thing. And I think that's what kind of keeps us going. It's just like, look, man, we might not be having the quarter we want. We might not be having the month we want. We might not be having the year we want. But the engine's going to turn and the train will leave eventually. And if you're sitting around pouting, feeling sorry for yourself because you're not doing the kind of work you want, that's nobody's fault but yours.
To the point, man. I love it. It's the truth. You mentioned Loki's. There was another video that I watched on your website that you guys did for Cavaness Meatpacking Plant up in Hereford, and yeah, it appeared to be, I believe it was a hiring video, but just the message and the heart and what was portrayed in that, I feel like it fits a lot to what you were just talking about. West Texas people know Hereford, but the rest of the world, probably even the rest of the state, Hereford is like, you're like, where? It's outside of Amarillo. Oh, okay, well, I know Amarillo is,
Right.
and so it's man, I think it's something. I think that drive and that desire that you have for this region is great, and it's something that and it's really the mentality of, just because we aren't Hollywood or we aren't a large city out here in the Panhandle in West Texas, it doesn't mean that we can't have the same quality. That's probably a soapbox. We don't need to go down that road. But
oh, well, I can because I mean, I'll just say this, right? You talk about Hereford, you're talking about essentially the beef capital of the United States, if not the world, right? Not to brag on Trevor and what his family's doing over there too much, but I mean, there was a point in time where every single In-N-Out burger in the state of Texas was mooing in Hereford before it got to wherever it was going, right? Like, I mean, those guys are supplying beef across the country, one, which is amazing. And then you think about Lubbock too. I mean, that's the Cotton Kingdom down there, right? So odds are the what I'm wearing right now, even though I bought it from Target, the cotton came from Lubbock, right? And so you have a lot of people nationwide, and this is not a political thing by any means, but I think the perception of West Texas is we're all just a bunch of cowboys who ride our horses to work, and what would we know about marketing, or what would we know about communication? Like, stick in your lane, right? But here's the fact of the matter is the world doesn't run without West Texas. And I don't want to get on a soapbox, but when it comes for agriculture, the food you eat, the oil and gas you're using, all of that kind of stuff, you take us out of the mix, not even all of Texas, but us out of the mix, and the nation's up the creek without a paddle. And so, you talk about the passion that we share for this region. I have a lot of it because it's like my career, I'm not doing what we're doing for the big brands all the time. I'm doing what I'm doing because of the people in West Texas decided to give us a shot. And so, I dare anybody to try to say something wrong about our part of the woods, because anyway, I've got stats out the door to talk about how everybody needs us just as much as we need them, and how proud I am to be able to do that work here.
I love that. And like you said, I mean, I brought up the soapbox, so that's my bad. But I am curious about, you've talked about, I've seen another podcast here, Amarillo National Spot. You mentioned it in the Super Bowl, and you gave a lot of credit in that video. It was brought to you, a good friend of yours that has the Hey Amarillo podcast, did the copywriting, and the VP of marketing director at Amarillo National came to you and said, "Hey, we want you to produce this." And you looked at the copy and you were like, "Is this right?" You're like, did this get approved? And so, obviously I understand that like those scenarios happen, but when you're meeting with people, and really, I think this is just more of a curiosity for being solution oriented and navigating hard times. I'm really curious of how you communicate a vision. If a client comes to you and says, "Hey, I want you to learn about what we do. I want you to kind of understand our business," which is probably something that I know you guys do really well, anyways, without being asked. But at that point, it's like once you've got a vision and a direction, if one may not have been given, how do you communicate that? Because I know that those conversations can be hard a lot of times.
Oh, 1,000,000%, right? And a lot of times, depending on whatever job we're doing, like that particular spot, which in my opinion, I think is the spot that changed the trajectory of like what Lemieux Company could be and what it wanted to be. That was like the first legitimate, I felt like, full scale production commercial I'd ever done. But sometimes clients will just bring the script to us. Sometimes the client will bring a creative brief and then we go from there. Sometimes it's like, hey, we've got the treatment already built. We just want you guys to execute the production standpoint of it. And so we've done everything from help to come up with the sandbox within which a client can have an idea to taking the sandbox that's already been built. Excuse me. From taking the sandbox that's already been built to just saying, hey, we've got a director, we've got a DP, we want you guys to execute the vision on the ground while we're here. So we've done everything there. But I think that to answer your question, a lot of people look at creativity like, oh, we're just throwing ideas at the wall and maybe something will stick. But I think you guys will know as well as I do that a lot of times creativity is such a process on the front end before you ever get to the production of it. And creativity, in my opinion, is a science in and of itself, right? And so when we've been asked to kind of generate an idea, I try to go from everything from, okay, cool, let me understand your brand. What are your core values? What's your mission statement? What's your vision? How do you think your customers see you? How do you see your customers, right? Those types of things. And then we take that understanding of the brand and then we get a better understanding of the target audience, right? And a target audience isn't always just, hey, who are the people that most likely give us money? Sometimes that target audience is, hey, we're trying to reach this new aspect of the general population to be able to gain market share. And let's just call them, back in my day, millennials were 18 to 25, but that's like not the case anymore. But let's just say multicultural millennials that are in between the ages of 30 and 40 years old, right? Like those people are thinking about your brand, what your brand helps to provide, a lot different than maybe like Caucasian Gen Zers ages 18 to 25, right? So like the same spot, the same video, the same creative doesn't always work depending on what audience it is, but it still has to like live within the same kind of brand capsule here. And I'm using my hands a lot, right? So like just follow along,
Okay.
viewers.
But you don't know what to do with your hands.
I know, dude, exactly. And so you take an understanding of the brand, you take an understanding of the target audience, and then you think about, okay, what are the demographic, like what kind of demographic information are we getting there? What kind of psychographic information are we getting there? And then we take all of that data and then we apply it to what the goal of the spot is, right? Whether it's a commercial or it's branded content or it's going to be played at a conference or fundraiser, et cetera. Like there's our goals there. So with this data, how do we apply it to this goal? And from there, you generate a creative messaging strategy, et cetera, knowing all of those different data points. And it sounds really complicated. And I think that I'm definitely not trying to make it sound that way, but we like to approach creative from a very data-driven perspective, as much data we can get from our clientele, because if you're going to spend money on any kind of advertising, the more you understand about your customer, who their customers are, and what they're trying to achieve, you can take that data and apply it to a creative vision that has a better chance of success in general, right? And so what we'll do from there is we'll take all that data, we'll put together what's called a treatment. And it's a very in-depth look at what we're going to do to accomplish those goals that I've mentioned before. Sometimes it's 4 pages, sometimes it's 25 pages. I mean, we've submitted as much as a 40-page treatment before, right? Equipped with like storyboards from a shot-by-shot perspective. And then we line out like what that vision is, how we plan to execute it. And you have all of this huge kind of like smorgasbord worth of stuff that goes into how we're going to get it made. And then once we get that thing sold, we'll build out schedules. We'll go down from everything to talent and crew, locations, etc. But to really drive a point home, I need to know as much as I can know from our customers, or we need to know, to be able to really drive that home, because creative's no good. I mean, you can't put lipstick on a pig, right? And it's like going out on a first date, right? Like I have a presentation in Wellington in a couple of weeks talking about a brand, and a brand is as simple as who's like, think about the best person you know. What do you think about them, right? And if you've gone on a date with like your spouse or whatever, you didn't walk into that date half cocked, fellas. You know what I mean? And so, like, if you want this girl or gal or guy or whoever to like you, you need to be able to come to the table with some accurate conversation points. And that's the same kind of mentality we bring to our video pieces where we can, because I feel like these days, advertising, marketing, messaging is so fragmented anyway. Like, if you're not going to say something that matters, then you're just part of the clutter. You're just part of the noise. And taking that approach typically helps us to kind of cut through that with our clientele.
Well, you did touch a lot of like the content base that really makes your videos stand out. And you don't really have to, I feel like you probably don't have to sell yourself too much to a lot of these clients, because even visiting your website, the imagery and the visuals of your videos are very Hollywood-esque. And I've seen a fair share of commercials here locally, and I know some of them do not touch, a lot of the visuals that you bring to the table. So how do you bring those elements to really give a blockbuster type of video?
And so I really do appreciate you saying me, like you did this, but I like to say we did it, right? While I'm the one sitting in the production office here, a lot of the stuff that you've seen on the website, or folks can go and see on the website, it takes a small village, right? And so there are certain creative concepts that don't take as big of a scale of a team. But some concepts take a ton, right? I mean, this year alone, we've had sets of 25 to 30 people. Last year, I think the biggest set we had was about 45 people in a day in one house to try to shoot something. And so there's a difference. Our stuff looks different than maybe any kind of like local media outlet. And again, I want to make sure that like I'm not putting down anybody and anywhere that's doing any kind of film work at all. I've been very lucky to build a really good team of people, and their success is the reason that Lemieux Company's work is successful. It's definitely not just me. I get to be the mayor of the village, and that has its pros and cons. But a lot of times, I've had a lot of guys bail us out and make us look really good. And I think that's the kind of foundation of being a good leader and owning a business and being good to folks. But I do want to say that it's a lot more than just Wilson. I'll put it that way. My name's on the door, but there's a lot of homies inside. And so, depending on the job, right? But there's always some kind of like baseline of how we want to apply the look, right? You can say some of it's the camera, you can say some of it's the glass, you can say some of it's the production design. But at the end of the day, pretty light is pretty light, right? And so we have a high focus on how those things are lit, how we're picking locations. Everything that we do from a decision-making standpoint tailors itself to how can we maximize the budget of our clientele to make this look as good as it needs to look, to execute or to achieve whatever goal that client needs to have, right? And so, yeah, we have some cool cameras we use. Yes, we have some cool team members that we bring in. But that being said, it all is tailored to how do we maximize what a client's looking for on the high end and maximize the best version of what they need. And so typical teams will be me. I'll serve as kind of the creative director, executive producer, and I'll build the sandbox through which my director can really tell this story. And then the director will bring in a good DP, and we'll bring in a solid gaffer, and we'll tailor our shots to how to maximize how good that looks in each scene, right? And so achieving that look has a lot to do with, okay, how cool does the location look, right? Like, no offense to you guys, but you don't necessarily want to shoot up against a yellow wall. You know what I mean? At the same time, it's like, how are we maximizing windows? No, well, and this doesn't have to look good. So
but we love the inside. Like these are things that for us, we don't think at all. And for you in your industry, you're just like, yellow walls probably wouldn't work. So no, we love the vision that
The work
you've
order's
been
already
talking
in,
about
by
that.
the way. I've already submitted it to get our walls painted, so thank you. Just now, I did it
But
just
so
now.
good, great. I think that's good. But for podcasting, it doesn't matter as much, right? But next time you watch a movie, right? Next time you watch a commercial, right? Like you'll notice, like on the higher end, they tailor these things to look as good as it can look. Like one of my favorite directors of photography, his name is Roger Deakins. He shot Blade Runner 2049, 1917, No Country for Old Men, right? There's like a rule that he applies to so much that's just basics. And I think any kind of solid photographer that you know in Lubbock or anywhere else will be able to understand what you're saying here. It's shoot from the shadow side, have a really big soft key, pepper the background with dark and light objects, and then all of a sudden you've got an image that's pretty, right? Now, how do you apply that to XYZ scenario? It takes a team. And to answer your question in short, so if you need like a clip to use, because I know I can ramble, the reason our stuff looks the way it does is because we're very meticulous about the way we set up an image for our clientele. That imagery takes a team of people. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, to kind of achieve what kind of imagery we're looking for. And then ultimately, all of that goes together to build something that looks good, sounds good, feels good, and then accomplishes the messaging goals that our clientele needs.
I want to touch on one thing, and this is something that Lorenzo and I, having an opportunity to be on this podcast and interview leadership, people in leadership across numerous industries, something that I'll speak for Lorenzo on this because I know that he feels the same way. Something that we see that is a constant across great leaders is that they're we people, not me people. And so it is, we've been corrected. We get so, we're talking to a person. And so we get so used to saying, well,
Right, yeah.
you do. And so, I mean, probably every episode we've been corrected. And I mean, I think it's a testament to being in an elite group of leaders who, are willing to correct somebody when, whether it's on purpose or not, they say, you did great. And it says, well, no, we did great. And so huge shout out for that. I also wanted to touch on something else you said, and this was something that you had said to us previously, and I thought it was super interesting. And I kind of want to dive into this ideology. And it's this statement of advertising has become aligned with unsolicited intrusion. And I think I probably butchered that a little bit. That's that's my version of what you said to me, or said to us. And so, how is, like, with that being an ideology that is really pretty standard? I mean, you recorded TV, you can fast forward. Streaming now, you really can't do that. But the world has gone to this. I just want to watch what I want to watch mentality, or I just want to see what I want to see. In what y'all are producing, how do y'all combat that ideology?
And so it's interesting too, because like there's a customer we're talking about this kind of stuff right now in terms of just media so ultimately fragmented, and maybe they don't need a commercial, right, per se, in the traditional sense that plays on TV. But I'll come back to that. What you talked about is advertising is viewed as an unsolicited intrusion. I think the quote that I'd mentioned there, and I can't remember who said it. We'll say it was Leo Burnett, but it's somebody big in those spaces, one of those great old titans of the advertising industry. But advertising is seen as an unwelcome guest in your home, right? And so I think that anybody that's in this industry that is trying to legitimately sell what we do, we all know that, right? And our customers know that, right? Like I spend 6 to 7 hours a day on my phone in one way or the other, whether I'm communicating, emailing, but a lot of times I'm on TikTok, you know what I mean? Or like Instagram or something. And I'll frankly, I'll skip over every ad that I can, but there's one campaign right now that LG's doing on TikTok that I think is absolutely amazing. So if we're going to look at advertising as an unwelcome guest in your life, how do we position the advertising to be the neighbor with the power tool you need, right? Or the neighbor with the cup of sugar you need to borrow, right? And a lot of that comes from people don't watch advertising. People don't want to pay attention to marketing. They want to watch entertaining things or entertainment. And sometimes that can be advertising. And that's the frame of mind that we always try to bring to what we're doing, right? Some people call it advertainment, some people call it X, Y, or Z. But, you know, even going back to the client we had that's like advertising so fragmented and nobody wants to watch these things. Well, no joke. Like, I don't want to hear somebody sell me something 8 to 9 hours a day. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. But to go back to what LG's doing, I was scrolling through TikTok, and LG's got this TikTok like timeline purifier, right? So they've got an entire playlist that you can go on and watch all these videos. And it like basically resets your For You page on your TikTok so that you can like get more fun, laid back, less like the world's going to end type of content, right? And for people that are spending more and more time on their phone, who are seeing more and more messages of X, Y, or Z, this doesn't apply to me. I'm bogged down by the relentless like slog of advertising messages that are coming through. For LG to be able to come in and set up basically an entire playlist that cleans the gunk off of my For You page, that's making yourself the neighbor with the power tool you need. That's making yourself the neighbor with the cup of sugar you can need. And so it's that same type of mindset that we apply to a lot of our creative. I think one really fun one that we've done is what we did for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And this was a couple years ago. They started getting good a couple years ago. I'm not taking credit for that, but I'm not taking credit for that either, right? But the creative
look good, feel good, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But the brief, they said, we want to advertise we want to talk about our basketball team without ever showing our basketball team. So how do you promote the experience that the Oklahoma City Thunder organization provides without ever showing any basketball? Well, you showcase the community, you showcase the dancers, you showcase the cheerleaders, you showcase the drum line. You put together all of these different things that really add to the experience, whether or not the basketball team's any good, right? Just so happened that they gave the Mavs a run for their money and looked a lot better than against the Mavs than the Timberwolves did, right? But like to be able to embody a city the way that sports teams do and communicate, we love our town just as much as we love winning or not winning games. That was a great opportunity for us to really showcase, hey, we're not just the unsolicited guest in your home. We're part of your community, and we want to showcase what it means to be a part of the Oklahoma City community and what it means to us to have you guys buy into the loud city culture that is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so that was a long-winded answer, I think. But
it was great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think there's no secret that what we do can be a turnoff to a lot of people when they're just trying to decompress, right? Especially in the video standpoint. But the fact of the matter is, people engage with film content and video content more than they ever have before. Every single platform is promoting it more than they're even doing standalone pictures these days. And so you have to have some kind of strategy. And why not be the invited guest? Why not be something people love to see? Why not be something that seems iconic and your target audience feels viewed by, than just, hey, come on down to Cartown and like buy yourself a new Chevy, right? Like that's where I get very, very, very passionate is like we work in an industry that everybody can see at times as an annoyance. But you know what ads I remember the most? The Grey Poupon spot, a Marlowe National Bank's ad that used to run in like the 90s when I lived in Wellington, Texas. Like that still sticks with me. You think about the beef, what's for dinner, or got milk. Those become staples in culture, period. And why not try to do that on a local level, mid-level, national level? Quit trying to just shove stuff down people's throats. If you can make something that's catchy or fun or something that everybody kind of laughs at, smirks at, when they hear it, see it, pay attention to it, then you're in, man. And no longer are you somebody that's just trying to sell a customer something. You become a partner in their everyday life as a pick-me-up. Now, you might want to cut this out. Some folks might say that's bullshit, right? But at the end of the day, like, we all have to interact with advertising. In my opinion, it might as well be good.
I agree.
Absolutely. I think the emotional side of things, many brands lack that side, and also open communication between them and their consumer, and allowing, opening TikToks, forums for them to really hear from the consumer. And I think that's why a lot of brands struggle, is because they still think of themselves in the old school way of branding, where they promote a brand, the consumer rides it. Now it's more of promote a brand, consumer provides feedback, there's engagement, there's emotion. Um, you truly are passionate about the same things that the consumer is looking for. So all those things, even in past interviews or, with past guests, those things are important in today's world. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that in today's, um, for commercials and advertisements. And so that seems to be the exact same direction that you're going in. And one thing that we did want to ask is, while you are going into these creative processes, talk to us a little bit about a time where you had unexpected changes. You have tight deadlines, budgets to stay within. How does your team stay, on tracks with everything?
Well, and I think, that's a great question, Lorenzo. And I think you guys probably face the same thing to a certain extent in your line of
Never,
work as well.
never, not even once.
I've, I've worked with marketing departments, big or small, and there's always a wrench thrown into things, right? And no matter where, but specifically in production. Like, I can remember we did a spot last year where, we had everything set up, wardrobe picked up, everything was approved. Client threw down, it's like, hey, we can't have reds, we can't have greens, we can't have oranges because those are competitors' colors. Oh, okay, right. And so I think that we're able to pivot a lot of times. I think because we can be small and nimble, and I think you have to have the experience to be able to pivot when wrenches get thrown into the situation. That's just the name of the game. It's the name of the game in creative. It's the name of the game in execution, et cetera. You just have to be flexible. And so we do everything we can on the front end to help mitigate a lot of that, right? But to a certain extent, it's inevitable. And you have to have a team and a client that's okay with the chaos in the moment to an extent when those things come up. It's our responsibility as a service provider to try to mitigate as much of that as possible. But when you're working with some brands, it's like, look, the CEO is not in the office with the marketing director every single day, right? And the CEO can have an idea, or the president or whatever can have an idea or a thought days before the shoot happens, and the marketing director can't necessarily always explain, hey, we can't just turn the Titanic right here. And so I look at what I do and what we do as Lemieux Company is I'm very much so a service provider, right? Like, yes, the videos are cool. Yes, those things are fun. Yes, we've got all these ideas and the creative, etc. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like there's much difference between me and a plumber, right? And what I mean by that is I've been hired to do a job. Make sure you clean the poop up and make sure it looks pretty on the back end, right? And so, like, sometimes as a service provider, you just have to serve your customer and make it happen, because most marketing directors, no matter what line of work you're in or what industry it's in, they want to look good in front of their boss, right? They want to execute at a high level, right? They want to do really good. Film is an inherently very intimidating thing, especially if you've never done it like you're just doing it for the first time. And so the easier we can make those pivots for a marketing director that wants their CEO or their high-end boss to feel like, hey, these people did a good job, I have to be a servant. And so we'll do our best to always try to make some of those things happen and change that for them, just because, like, yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm running out of really cool things to say here, but sometimes it's just you have to take the crap with the champagne and, like, make it happen for the sake of the customer. And while it might not line up with the goals you set out on the front end, at the end of the day, do you want to be right, or do you want your client to call you back? You know what I mean? And so it's like, how do you compromise what you want there so everybody wins? And so I think that's what's given us some success, is just bringing that servant mentality to what we do from the creative space. Because at the end of the day, like, there's this whole aspect of, okay, cool, we need to make ads that work, but there's also the truth of, like, I need to make sure my customer's happy. You know what I mean? And so that's, how do you balance both of
those? Sorry, it's I mean, I think that's great. It's especially working, we do this as well, but working with creatives, as a creative, working with creatives or working with marketing people, it's you have essentially two creative minds that may not always be going in the same direction. And so, but as long as, and we do this as well, as long as you are making sure that you are aligned with what success looks like for them, then those pivots don't hurt. You don't feel like what you produce or what you put out or what your company's name's on is subpar. It's exactly what the client wanted, and that's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like those side deals that come in and throw a wrench and everything, a lot of times the client just wants a remedy or a solution that would just help get them to the finish line of what the true vision is. And I know, Ian and I go through this quite a bit, to where something gets changed or something gets completely veered off into a different concept, and we just want to be, like you mentioned, the service provider to say, hey, it's okay, here are your solutions. And from then on, it does give them a comfort to know that there is a solution, as opposed to, a concept argument of like, no, we need to go this way, or no, we can't do that. So the service provider really hits it dead on.
I have a random question. So you had, Wilson, you had brought up some of those iconic staple advertisements that you remember, Got Milk, that kind of stuff. And it got me thinking, and I think this is a group question. What is your all-time, never forget it advertisement?
That we've made or that I've seen?
That you've seen.
Oh, okay. So
no, both. Answer both. Answer what you've seen, and then we want to hear what you've made, because I'm interested to know.
Yeah, what y'all made.
Yeah, so like let me answer the one that like I'll probably never forget, right? Like one that I've seen, that one that just still like helps me want to, like makes me want to go make more ads. Like it's just like such a perfect concept. Oh my gosh.
Well,
there's several, but I think
Lorenzo, do you have yours? Lorenzo? Do you have one?
No.
I'll share mine. Wilson,
Okay.
while you're choosing from your short list, I will never, ever, ever forget watching the Super Bowl and having the Budweiser Frogs ad come across my screen, like my parents' screen.
So good.
The Budweiser, like I don't drink Budweiser. I don't even drink Bud Light. No offense to anybody, that's your deal, not mine. Sorry. But I will never, ever, ever forget that ad. I mean, that will live in my mind until the day I die.
Yeah. Two. I've got two. Here, and I have to share two. One's like from that era-ish, and then one's a touch more modern. So the one from like back in the day, do you remember and I think it was Budweiser, right? God, no, okay. No. That was going to be the one I was going to use.
That was what I was thinking about.
But that's secondary to So God Made a Farmer, right? And I'll tell you why that ad's so brilliant is because it was made for us, right? You have Paul Harvey reading that off. They hired iconic photographers from across the country to take pictures of these Dodge pickups, right? I hope it was for Dodge. This could be awful if it wasn't actually for Dodge. But you've got Paul Harvey, who represented so much of like what West Texas culture is. I can remember growing up driving to Amarillo to go to XYZ appointment as a kid, and you hear, so that's the rest of the story, right? From like Paul Harvey. But like So God Made a Farmer, the prose or, that copy is so ingrained into who we are as a people. Paul Harvey is such an iconic radio host to be able to deliver that. And then you have it tied to photography that really, truly matches it personifies what he's saying there. There was no music. There was no huge sound design. It was just Dodge laying it all out, saying, we see you. We understand you. We get you. Also, buy a new pickup for $80,000, right? But like, it was so good. So I think the was really good, and then the So God Made a Farmer spot is amazing. And then my third, in no order really is the Squarespace IamJohnMalkovich.com spot, because John Malkovich is just such an elite actor, and that problem that they're trying to solve in that spot, I think, is just like such a problem that any small entrepreneur can like identify with. It's like, somebody's got my domain name. What am I going to do here? And then like that conversation with somebody as big a deal as John Malkovich to try to get his domain name back, I just thought was sensational. And so those are my top three, I think, ads that those are the ones I wish I made. You know what I mean? Like, those are so good.
Yeah. Instant fact check says it was Dodge.
Good.
So
good.
Well, and with all these different projects that you've been a part of, how do you personally measure success in what you do?
Sales. No, well, I mean, honestly, like the more people buy videos, the better job we feel like we're doing, right? But I think it's different for each customer, lined out on depending on what the goal of each video is, right? So like you talk about the Cavanous Beef Packer spot, right? Feed the world. And that job was to recruit, people to be able to come fill their second shift. We helped them recruit 670 people over the course of 6 months or a year, somewhere in there, right? Like, I look at what we've been able to do with Amarillo National and Lubbock National Bank, and I gauge a lot of success there just because they keep coming back to us, right? Like they could go hire whoever they want to, but they give us those opportunities every year. And so to have those opportunities, like I gauge a lot of success there just because of the trust that they've given us, right? And they've grown like a weed, not because of us, but it's good to feel like, hey, we're a part of that, right? And then I think about Loki's Body Shop, where they had one warehouse when we started making videos for them. They're about to build their third, and they tell us we played a big role in their growth. And like, of course, I mean, you could tie it to how we've helped sell X, Y, Z thing, this, that, or the other. But to me, I think ultimately I gauge success based on the relationships we've been able to build with some of these folks, right? Some are very iconic brands that everybody knows about in West Texas. Some no one knew anything about them until we got to make a spot. And I think that there's different levels of success there anyway. But I think ultimately gauging the success of what X, Y, or Z commercial does, it's just the proof in the pudding, right? And it's different. It's different depending on what client there is, right? Like we've done training videos that have helped mitigate risk for oil and gas plants across the Panhandle, and they've helped to make sure people aren't getting hurt on job sites, right? We've done all kinds of things, but it's not always the big sexy thing that I attribute to success. Yeah, I want to help you sell as much stuff as you want to sell, right? But I also want to make sure that the lowest person in your employee team feels seen and heard too, right? And so like there's all different kinds of metrics that you can be able to use to stay successful. But I think ultimately, to kind of put a bow on it, it's just the relationships we've been able to build along the way, and the trust we've been able to build with our customers is because when they call you back to help tell a story, that means they trust you to tell their story. And that's a very intimate thing to have to do. And so I hope that answers your question.
No, I mean,
I think that's how I gauge success.
It was perfect. It was more than what we knew would be a response, just for the fact that a lot of what we want to do, granted, yes, there is sales behind it, but it's more of the intrinsic value, the reward we get from being told, hey, you were a helpful source, or thank you for allowing us to grow. I think that's something in and of itself that a lot of people with the same vision that you have thrive with. Even when at the end of the day, things may not be like you said, the sales volume, the monthly sales volume you're used to seeing or you'd like to see. But the small things also do help us each and every day just to continually be a great resource for these different clients. And Ian, I'll let you have that last question.
Yeah, so
it's something we ask everybody, Wilson. So no pressure.
We're collecting these as part of a case study. Actually,
okay,
that's not
cool.
a bad idea. That's really not a terrible idea, Lorenzo. What is a piece of advice, Wilson, that you were given that you'll never forget?
So you asked me too the favorite spot we've ever done. right? Sentimentally, it's Amarillo National Bank's boring as hell spot because that's when things really started to change, I think, for our career and my career and how I opened my eyes to be like, oh, okay, we can do big sexy now, right? Like we can do good creative. And Jason Boyette wrote that script, and I'll never try to take credit for that, but I was so lucky to be able to bring that to life. But using that as kind of the backdrop, that was the biggest job of my career, and that was 6.5 years ago at this point, right? Somewhere in there. Brought in a hotshot filmmaker, two hotshot filmmakers out of the Carolinas to come help me. I didn't know what I was doing for the most part in terms of just like, okay, I feel like there's a lot of pressure. I'm working with these people that I've really looked up to a ton. I just want this to look cool. Like, please help us get across the finish line. And it ends up being probably one of the most iconic spots in our portfolio, in my opinion. But I was so excited about bringing in these two badass dudes to come help me. I was so excited to be able to do a Super Bowl spot for Amarillo National Bank, which I told you guys before, I'd grown up watching. They're one of the most recognizable brands in the Texas Panhandle. And so it's like, this is like, man, big deal for me. And I'd ran into the coffee shop and run into a Spanish teacher I had in college. Her name is Susan Amos. And, a lot of folks that might listen to this might not be religious. I'm not trying to put anything like that on anybody, but what she said to me really spoke to me. And I told her I was nervous. I was really excited about this opportunity. And she said, well, the Lord's giving you a good opportunity. How are you going to steward that? And that is the kind of mentality I bring to every job that we do, is what a wonderful opportunity to be making commercials, cool videos in West Texas. How am I personally going to be a good steward to that? And I would apply that I would share that with anybody, whether or not you're religious or not. You found the opportunity. You've been given the privilege of feeling the pressure of that opportunity. I'm of the belief that we're here to take care of folks and to do good and right by other people and to use those opportunities to be able to bring people along the way. And so using that advice to share it with any listener is, you've been given the opportunity to do whatever it is you're doing in your life when you listen to this right now. How are you going to maximize that opportunity? How are you going to be a good steward of the universe, or whatever you want to call it, giving you your shot? And that might be picking your kids up from school. That might be putting on a $2.5–3 million commercial for Nike. That might be getting the biggest case of your career if you're a lawyer, or opening up a new franchise if you're at Taco Villa, or at, what's the snow cone place? You know what I'm talking about?
Bahama
Bahama
Bucks.
Bucks.
Bahama Bucks, right? Or you might be opening up a new store, getting the biggest new kind of media deal if you're at United or whatever, right? Whatever you're at. You've been given this chance now, and it can be huge or it can be little. How are you going to take that opportunity and maximize it, not only for yourself, but to take care of others too? And that was the best kind of advice I'd ever gotten, and I've applied that to everything that we've ever done. Is, you talk about Lemieux Company, Wilson has made some really cool spots. Brother, if I wouldn't have been a good steward of any of those opportunities, I might be working in a graveyard somewhere. You know what I mean? And so, like, I attribute so much of my success, however big or small it might be, to trying to steward the best opportunity I've given and how to share that opportunity with everybody around me, because we weren't meant to do it on our own. You know what I mean? And so, anyway, I've rambled like I have on every single question, guys, but
Yeah,
that's the best advice I've ever gotten.
I think that's something that most of us don't do, is take advantage of the opportunity. We allow the anxiety and the nerves to really get a hold of us in many cases, and that refrains us in certain times to not even be able to execute it to our full potential. So, no, that was some great advice.
It was awesome. That's the best idea we've ever had, Lorenzo, is for that to be a staple question. So I've loved that. That was awesome, Wilson. And I feel like I say this on every episode. It is, but it's a pretty constant thing that the advice that sticks with someone else is kind of rocks my world too. And I think that I'm really glad we do that. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the Binding Minds. I mean, this is a platform where we want anybody and everybody in the marketing industry, various industries, to learn more about branding and it's different things that, even though we're in the printing industry and you're with advertising, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of similarities that we all go through, and I think that this is a helpful platform for them. So thank you so much, Wilson. We had a great time.
Yeah,
And
thank
Ian,
you.
if you want to close this out, we'll
Yeah.
wrap this thing up.
Y'all, thanks for joining us for another episode of Binding Minds. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Binding Minds Podcast. See you next time.